Rain had begun to fall long before dusk settled over the small, nameless town, a thin, cold drizzle that softened the edges of the world and made the streetlights glow like dying embers. On the outskirts, a narrow road curved through a cluster of deserted warehouses, windows boarded, ceilings collapsed, rust spreading across every surface like a slow disease. Few people ever came this way anymore. The ones who did had no reason to linger. But on one particular October night, a single figure stood in the shadows, watching the rainfall bead along the broken glass and drip down the metal siding of Warehouse 12. The figure's breath fogged faintly in the chill air. He didn't shiver, he didn't move, he only watched. Inside that warehouse, years earlier, the body of a young woman had been found, posed in a way that had baffled investigators, terrified locals, and eventually earned the killer a whispered nickname. They called him the Architect, not because he built anything, but because he arranged things, people, scenes, entire moments of horror with meticulous structure and meaning. Every kill was planned down to angles, distances, and details no ordinary person would notice. He left symbols carved into wood, metal, or sometimes the walls themselves. They weren't messages, not exactly. They were blueprints, shapes, grids, patterns, and nobody understood them. For nearly a decade, the architect's crimes haunted the region. He struck once every year, never the same town, never the same method, but always the same ritualistic arrangement of the body, always the same uncanny geometric symbols nearby. He became a legend, a phantom woven into the fears of small communities, the kind of name parents quietly avoided when their children asked why the police were out again. His last known killing had been 7 years ago. Since then, silence. Cold silence. Investigators believed he was either dead, imprisoned under some unrelated charge, or simply done. But the darkness does not vanish. Sometimes it waits. And sometimes someone else watches. Detective Lena Hargrave remembered the architect better than most. She was young then, too young by her own standards, fresh into the Special Investigations Unit, eager to prove herself. She remembered the first body, the strange precision, the way the crime scene felt less like a place of violence and more like a gallery of terror. She remembered how the older detectives whispered when they thought she couldn't hear, how they called the killer a ghost with a ruler, how they joked with a nervous edge that art museums should start checking their back rooms. But behind every deflection was fear. Raw fear. Because it was clear even then that the architect didn't kill from rage or impulse. He killed to design. And that made him infinitely more dangerous. The case consumed her early career. It consumed others too, many of whom eventually burned out, transferred, retired early, or spiraled into heavy drinking and sleepless nights. But not Lena. For her, the case lit a different kind of flame. She felt the itch of patterns everywhere, lines forming connections others couldn't see, small details fitting into bigger shapes. She studied architecture, geometry, symbolism. She began to dream in angles and shadows, not because she admired the killer, but because she needed to understand him. She needed to end him. But she never got the chance. Tonight, the rain tapped softly against her car windshield as she parked across from Warehouse 12, now years abandoned. A stray orange light flickered above the entrance. She wasn't here to revisit the past. She was here because the past had come back. Earlier that week, a body was found in a neighboring county, posed exactly as one of the architect's victims from 12 years ago. Down to the tilt of the head, the placement of the hands, the distance between the body and the nearest wall. Every detail was a perfect recreation. Too perfect. And when Lena saw the scene photos, she felt a deep, bitter cold settle into her bones. Because there was something wrong, something different. The original architect kill was messy, not an execution, but an environment. An old cabin, collapsed beams, mud from the storm that night. The new scene was too clean, too controlled, as if the killer had studied the original from photographs and recreated it like a student copying a master painting. The cut marks were not as smooth. The symbol carved into the wood beam was slightly off, precise, but lacking the exact mechanical confidence she'd seen years ago. This wasn't the architect. This was someone copying him. Someone who wanted to resurrect the terror but lacked the architect's true hand. And that terrified her even more. Copycats were unpredictable. They admired, imitated, distorted. They didn't follow the same logic as the original killer. They didn't have the same discipline. They were often driven by obsession rather than purpose. And obsession burned hot, chaotic, and fast. She stepped out of her car, the rain dampening her coat as she approached the warehouse. Every footstep echoed faintly in the empty lot. The scent of rust and old water filled her senses. A memory tugged at her. The first time she walked through these doors, her heart pounding, the air thick with dread. Tonight felt eerily similar, as if the years between then and now had folded inward and time had become elastic. Inside, the darkness yawned open like a hollow throat. Her flashlight cut through the black, illuminating gust motes swirling in the cold air. Nothing had changed. The police tape from years ago still clung to the wall in limp, weather-worn tatters. The graffiti was faded. The puddles on the floor reflected the beam like shards of broken mirrors. She walked slowly, listening. There were no footsteps, no soft breathing, no movement. But there was a feeling, a presence. Not a person. Memories, patterns, echoes. The architect had displayed his victim here, and now someone else wanted to echo him. Someone who had either been inspired recently or had been studying him for years. A drip of water echoed in the vast emptiness, and then another. But then another sound. A soft click. Metal on concrete. Delicate. Almost polite. Lena froze. Her hand hovered near her weapon. The sound came again, faint, rhythmic, as if something small was being rolled or tapped on the floor. She followed it. Her light landed on a silver object placed neatly at the center of the room. A compass. Not the directional kind, but the drawing kind, the kind used to create perfect circles. Clean, unrusted, recently placed. Her breath tightened. This wasn't the architect's style. This was someone paying tribute, and someone who wanted her to find it. The compass lay perfectly centered on the warehouse floor, its polished metal glinting under Lena's flashlight like a tiny, cruel star. It hadn't been there long. No dust clung to it, no rust. It was new, bought recently, placed intentionally. A message, but not one of the architect's messages. His symbols had meaning, meticulous lines carved into surfaces with a steady, composed hand. This compass, however, it felt theatrical, an accessory, something meant to impress, not communicate, a prop. Lena crouched slowly, careful not to disturb the nearby footprints, if there were any. The warehouse floor was mostly concrete, but stray patches of old dust might still hold impressions. Her beam skimmed along the ground. Nothing. Whoever left the compass had been cautious, yet not cautious enough to stay invisible. The metal was warm. Her fingers recoiled instinctively. Warm meant recent, very recent. She stood abruptly, scanning the shadows. The warehouse swallowed her light whole, as though the darkness itself thickened with each breath she took. Rain tapped steadily outside, blending with the faint hiss of wind through the broken siding. She listened, hard. Every muscle tightened, waiting for the scrape of a shoe, the whisper of breath, the shift of a lurking figure. Nothing. But she knew someone had been here minutes before she arrived, maybe seconds. And worse, they wanted her to know it. She pocketed the compass carefully, sealing it in a small evidence bag she carried out of habit rather than necessity. Retirement hadn't burned the investigator out of her. It had simply chained it beneath her ribs, waiting for moments exactly like this. When she stepped outside, the rain felt colder, harsher, the type that clung to clothing and seeped into the skin like a warning. She slid into her car, turned the engine, and sat in silence, her mind replaying the shape of the crime scene from earlier in the week, the copied kill, the anonymous call that had tipped them off, the overly detailed description the caller had given before hanging up. Copycats usually weren't bold enough to insert themselves so early. They like to watch chaos first, savoring the ripple effect of fear. But this one was trying to get her attention, trying to start a conversation, trying to be seen. As she drove back toward town, she reviewed everything she remembered about copycat killers from past investigations. They tended to be obsessive, insecure, detail-oriented yet emotionally impulsive, desperate for recognition, often younger, often isolated, always chasing an identity that wasn't theirs. But the question gnawed at her. Why the architect? Why resurrect a monster that had been silent for years? Why this killer's signature and not someone more notorious, more accessible? Unless the person wasn't choosing randomly. Unless they felt personally connected to the architect. Or worse, inspired by him. Lena turned onto a quieter road, her wipers slicing through sheets of rain. The night was a wash of red taillights and distant neon. The world blurred as though it too was trying to hide from whatever was creeping back into the region. Her phone buzzed. She answered. "Hargrave," she said. A strained voice replied. "Detective, it's Neil from County Forensics. We ran the analysis on that symbol carved into the cabin." Lena straightened. "And?" He said. "It's wrong. It's clean, but too clean. The original carving technique from the architect had micro tremors in the corners, a signature almost from the tool he used. This new one doesn't have them. Whoever did this tried really hard, but they didn't know the nuances." "I expected that," Lena murmured. She could hear shuffling papers on his end, a pen tapping nervously. "There's more," Neil added. There were fibers at the seam. Synthetic. New, not weathered at all. Like, purchased recently. She frowned. "What kind of fabric?" "We're still testing, but early results say nylon. A jacket or backpack lining, probably." "Anything else?" A pause. Then, a partial shoe print. Lena's pulse quickened. "Size?" He said, "Between 9 and 10. Hard to confirm, but it looks like a newer athletic shoe. Not hiking boots, not work boots. It's casual footwear." Younger, Lena thought again. Likely male, likely local, or from a nearby town. Someone who had access to older case files, online crime archives, or even crime forums where the architect had become an urban legend. After she hung up, she sat quietly in her car at a red light, watching rain streak down the windshield in thin, shimmering lines. A thought surfaced, one she didn't like. There were online communities dedicated to the architect. After his disappearance, he'd become a fascination for people seeking meaning and madness. Amateur sleuths, conspiracy theorists, niche true crime fans, people who loved patterns and puzzles. Some romanticized him. Some tried to decode his symbols. Some even speculated they could finish what he started. Lena shut those forums out years ago. She didn't want to engage with people who treated the victims like decorations and the killer like a misunderstood genius. But now, she didn't have a choice. She needed to know who among those communities had stepped out from behind the keyboard. She drove through town until the lights thinned and houses became silhouettes behind rain-streaked fences. Her home sat near the edge of a wooded area, quiet, isolated, a place she'd chosen for peace. Tonight, it felt like prey. She locked every door behind her, then tossed her coat over a chair and opened her laptop. The glow from the screen painted her living room in pale blue. Rain pounded the windows harder now, a steady drumming like fingers tapping the glass. She typed the name she had avoided for years. Architect's Case Discussion Forum Archive. Hundreds of results appeared. She clicked the one she recognized. The forum layout was old, outdated, nearly abandoned, but not entirely. A handful of recent posts flickered with life. Username after username lit the page. Cryptic pseudonyms, numbers, symbols. She scrolled. One thread caught her eye. The return of the architect. Why his legacy isn't finished. Posted 3 days ago. Her breath stilled. She clicked it. The first post was long, elaborate, and disturbingly enthusiastic. Someone had analyzed the architect's murders as artistic masterpieces, broken them down into sections, and then, horrifically, critiqued the technique. But what froze Lena entirely was the second comment from another user. A real artist doesn't disappear. He evolves. Blue Spiral 23. The username meant nothing to her, but the timestamp did. Posted 2 hours after the new body was found, 5 hours before the police made the information public. She leaned closer. The user had continued posting in other threads, deep commentary on the geometry, the symbolism, even predictions on what the next evolution of the architect's work could look like. Someone pretending to be an expert. Someone longing for the power, the identity, the legacy of a killer they'd never met. Then she noticed something else. In the most recent comment, Blue Spiral 23 wrote, "Some people see a compass as a tool. Some see it as destiny." Lena froze. Her hand moved slowly to her coat pocket. The compass she found in the warehouse. The compass placed deliberately, recently. Her heart thudded in her chest. This wasn't just a copycat. It was a copycat who was watching her. And he wanted her to watch him back. The next morning leaned heavy and gray over the town, the kind of cold, misty dawn that made everything feel quieter than it should be. Lena hadn't slept, not even for a minute. The compass sat on her kitchen table like an intruder she couldn't escort out, a small silver eye watching her every movement, whispering a message she hadn't yet deciphered. By sunrise, she felt the shift. The copycat wasn't replaying old crimes for thrill. He was communicating, using symbols as his vocabulary, killings as his syntax, victims as punctuation marks in a message only he believed he understood. The architect had been methodical, controlled, a mathematician of death. But this new killer, whoever he was, carried something different in his shadow. Desperation. And desperate men made mistakes. She poured herself coffee that tasted like burnt metal and bitter roots, took a slow breath, and replayed everything she had read from Blue Spiral 23. Certain phrases lingered like rot in the air. Legacy isn't finished. He evolves. Destiny. Words chosen by someone who saw murder as performance. Someone who wanted to inherit the architect's identity like a family heirloom. But the more she read, the more she felt something else. This copycat, he wasn't just inspired by the architect. He was in love with him. Not romantically, but devotionally, obsessively. The way a cultist worships a god they've never seen. The way a lonely mind latches on to the structure of a monster and calls it guidance. And the more she thought about that, the more a certain profile formed in her mind. Male, late teens to early 30s, socially detached, online for long hours, consuming violent content as identity creation, possibly bullied, marginalized, or unnoticed, drawn to authority, control, and symbolism. Likely had attempted smaller acts of ritualistic behavior before, but something was still wrong. Copycats imitate because they lack originality. They are shadows chasing larger shadows. But this one was trying to surpass his master. She grabbed her coat, ignored the cold coffee, and drove to the station. Sheriff Ron Leland looked like he hadn't slept either. Red eyes, shirt half untucked, stress clinging to him like a second skin. "You hear anything on your end?" he asked as she walked in. "I found something. Online. A user posting specifics about the scene before it was public." He stiffened. "How specific?" "Specific enough to know we're dealing with someone who wants a conversation." She explained the forum, the posts, the timestamp contradictions, and the compass quote. With each detail, Leland's face grew a shade paler. "Did you identify the user?" he asked finally. "No real name, throwaway email, likely a VPN. But his writing style, that tells me enough." Leland rubbed his forehead. "We're dealing with a wannabe genius." "No," Lena corrected. "We're dealing with a student." She pulled out the compass she'd found, and he's leaving homework behind. Before Leland could answer, another deputy briskly entered with a tablet. "Sheriff," the deputy said, voice tight, "we got a patrol report from Route 19. They found another one." Lena's pulse dropped like a stone. "Another body?" she asked. "No," the deputy said, shaking his head in disbelief. "A symbol, carved into the guardrail." Lena's heart thrummed with dread. Symbols meant escalation. Symbols meant urgency. Symbols meant the copycat wanted to be heard, and louder this time. "Send me the location," Lena said immediately. The road to Route 19 felt longer than it should have. Wet pavement gleamed red under her taillights as the morning mist clung to the hills, heavy and unbroken. A couple of cruisers already waited near the guardrail, their lights flashing in muted, fog-dampened pulses. As she walked toward them, an uneasy silence followed. Deputies lowered their voices when she approached, a sign that whatever they found, it wasn't routine. The carving was worse than she expected. Not because it was sloppy, but because it wasn't. Someone had improved. The new symbol was clean, sharper, more confident than the one carved on the cabin wall. Precise angles, intentional spacing, and below the main design, scratched faintly into the metal like a whispered footnote, was a small spiral. A spiral the architect never used. "This isn't him," Lena whispered. "This is someone adding their own signature." A deputy nodded. "There's more." He led her a few steps down the road. A single item lay placed carefully on the asphalt, untouched by rain. A photo. Inside the laminated cover was an image of Lena herself, taken from a distance, blurry, but unmistakable. She stood outside her home, holding groceries, unaware she had been observed. A cold dread washed through her. This wasn't communication. This was claiming. Copycats often fantasized about stepping into investigative narratives, but this one wasn't content with playing the killer. He wanted to rewrite the whole story. Leland arrived moments later, swearing as he saw the photo. "Jesus, Hargrave." "He's targeting me," she said simply. "He was near my house." "Why you?" She looked back at the symbol. Because she was the one who caught the architect's trail years ago. Because she was the keeper of his darkness. Because she represented the origin story the copycat worshipped. She said, "He doesn't want to kill me," she said slowly. "Not yet. He wants validation, recognition. He wants me involved. He wants me to watch his performances." Leland rubbed his jaw. Is he building up to something? A big final act? Copycats build narratives in their heads, twisted arcs of escalation. For them, murder wasn't random violence. It was a script, a play, a self-appointed legacy in the making. "Yes," she said, "this is Act 1. Back at the station, Lena pulled out everything she knew about the architect, all the old files she had personally boxed away years earlier. Dust ghosted into the air as she opened them, the stale scent of archived nightmares rising like something alive. Photographs, maps, symbol sketches, victim profiles, patterns, dates. She studied them intensely, tracing the architect's logic through lines of ink and memory. He didn't pick random places. His locations formed geometric patterns, triangles, arcs, invisible gridwork across the land. But the new symbols didn't fit the map. Not yet. However, the copycat wasn't trying to recreate the architect's pattern. He was constructing his own. A broken reflection, a shadow map, a mimicry that wanted to grow teeth. She froze. On the warehouse floor, the compass needle had pointed northeast. Not toward the body found earlier, not toward the carved guardrail, but to a different location entirely. A location that wasn't marked in any of the architect's old patterns. A location that didn't hold significance for the original killer, but might for someone else. She grabbed a regional map and laid it flat. She marked the 3 recent sites. 1, the cabin victim. 2, the warehouse. 3, the Route 19 guardrail. Then she drew lines between them. A shape began forming, uneven, asymmetrical, meaningless at first glance. But then, the realization hit her like a punch. He wasn't copying the architect's geometry. He was drawing something else. A spiral. Her pulse hammered. Blue Spiral 23? It wasn't just a username. It wasn't a coincidence. He was literally carving his alias into the world. This is personal, Lena murmured. This whole pattern isn't about the architect. It's about his own identity. The compass wasn't a symbol of the original killer. It was a guide from the copycat, a direction, a path, a challenge. Her phone buzzed again. She answered quickly. Hargrave. But the voice on the other end stopped her breath. It was young, calm, cold, and digitally distorted. Detective Hargrave, the voice said softly. You're learning. Every muscle in her body locked. Who is this? She demanded. You already know. You've already known. You just didn't want to admit how predictable people become when they're ignored long enough. Lena's grip tightened around the phone. What do you want? A quiet, chilling chuckle. I want what he had. A legacy worth carving into the bones of the world. She closed her eyes. You're not the architect. No, the voice said, tone turning sharp and angry. I'm better. The line went dead, and Lena knew, without hesitation, the spiral had only begun. The task force met again 2 days later, their faces washed in the kind of exhaustion usually reserved for people carrying caskets. A storm rolled over the city, thunder shuddering through the precinct walls as if emphasizing every fear they were trying to suppress. On the digital board, case files flickered like warning lights. The original killer and the 3 copycats who had followed in their footsteps, and yet something still didn't add up. The timing, the latitude, the eerie silences between murders. Every investigator in that room felt it. There was a rhythm beneath the chaos, and they had not yet cracked its code. Detective Mara Larson stood with her arms crossed tightly against her chest, staring at the scattered timelines. Patterns reproduce themselves, she murmured, half to herself, half to the room. Not out of coincidence, but out of intention. She tapped the screen where the original killer's timeline ended. Everything after this should have diverged more. Copycats imitate, yes, but their mistakes reveal their differences. What we're seeing... Her voice trailed off, replaced by a frown. This looks coordinated? Coordinated? Between strangers? These copycats didn't know each other. Maybe not, she replied, but someone may have known them. That idea settled into the room like a cold draft. Captain Hargrove leaned forward, elbows on the table. You're suggesting a 4th actor, someone who wasn't physically present at any crime scene. Not physically, Mara confirmed, but ideologically, psychologically, very present. The captain frowned. A puppeteer? Or a curator, she whispered, selecting the canvas, the color, the brushstroke, through other people. Roach's brows pinched. So what? He feeds instructions to unstable individuals? Gives them methods, rituals? Or inspiration, Mara said with a bitter smile. Remember the forums we seized during the last investigation? The obscure message boards, the darknet archives full of people who treated the original killer like a mythological icon? She headed her head. Most of that activity died off, but what if something else replaced it? Quietly, privately, selectively. A low rumble of thunder punctuated her sentence. The room descended into an uneasy silence. Because even before Mara finished speaking, everyone knew she wasn't speculating. The evidence they had gathered, timelines, poses, specific marks, had been too precise, too ritualistic, too faithful to the original killer's design. Copycats mimic, they don't enhance. And whoever was behind this escalation understood the original killer more deeply than the killer had understood himself. The task force turned its attention to digital archaeology, re-examining old chat logs, hidden forums, decrypted private messages scraped from seized laptops. The FBI's cyber division joined, combing through layers of coded posts that stretched back nearly a decade. And slowly, painfully, something began to surface. A username. Just one. Appearing in threads years apart, always right before new waves of copycat cases emerged. A name that never posted instructions or threads, never encouraged violence directly,
only wrote philosophical commentary about completion, artistry, observation, and the act of reflection. The username was Mirror Man. The first time it appeared was 3 months before the earliest known copycat killing. The second time, 5 years later, was 2 weeks before the second wave. The third time, recently, was exactly 10 days before the new murders that compelled the task force to reopen the investigation. Rocha exhaled, almost laugh-like in disbelief. Mirror Man. That's subtle. Too subtle, Mara replied, eyes narrowing, because he doesn't have to instruct anyone. He just plants the seed. And the ones who are already unstable, they grow the rest themselves. Captain Hargrove rubbed his forehead. Can we trace him? No, said the cyber lead. He uses layered proxies, sometimes geographic spoofing that perfectly mimics multiple countries within seconds. He's good, really good. Mara stepped closer to the screen. Then we don't chase him digitally, we chase his psychology. For the next several hours, they dissected Mirror Man's writing style. Linguists examined syntax. Behavioral analysts studied tone. Criminologists compared word choice to transcripts from other killers, both caught and uncaught. And something startling emerged. Mirror Man's style was not one style. It was 4. 4 distinct writing patterns. 4 tonal signatures. 4 psychological profiles, hiding behind one name. Yet the linguistic shifts weren't random. They followed cycles. Each time a copycat killer emerged, the writing style had changed, mirroring the mental instability, emotional wound, or ideological bent of the soon-to-be killer. It was as if Mirror Man tailored his writing to resonate with a specific type of person, someone browsing, searching, desperate for meaning or validation, someone vulnerable, someone breakable. Rocha muttered, so he's not just inspiring them, he's grooming them. Indirectly grooming, Mara corrected. He never says do this. He only posts obsessions. Thoughts about symmetry, about incompleteness, about death as a form of balance. And the right kind of mind, she shook her head, it becomes a map. A detective from the behavioral unit frowned. But why copy the original killer's methods? Why not push them into their own? Mara looked at the screen again. Because the original killer created a myth. And myths don't evolve. They replicate. That's how they live. She paused. And Mirror Man wants the myth to live. By evening, the air in the precinct felt heavier, thicker, like something unseen had settled on everyone's shoulders. Mara went back to the photos pinned to the corkboard, studying the progression of crime scenes over the years. She noticed something she hadn't seen before, not because it was hidden, but because it was quiet, a detail so small that had gone overlooked. In every copycat case, the killer left behind a window or mirror cleaned spotless, even if the rest of the room was chaotic. A reflection surface, untouched, unbroken, pristine. The original killer had never done this, only the imitators. And that meant the ritual wasn't from the original murderer. It was an addition, a signature that did not belong to the killers themselves, because none of the copycats were known to have obsessive tendencies about reflection or cleanliness. It belonged to Mirror Man, his whisper, his touch. The realization hit Mara like a shiver. He's not copying the killer. They are copying him. He's the invisible author they're all following. The original killer inspired chaos, but Mirror Man inspired refinement. Rocha looked shaken, meaning he's escalating them? Perfecting them? No, Mara corrected softly. He's perfecting himself. Through them. The room froze, because that idea, more than any other, explained everything. Mirror Man wasn't trying to recreate the original killer's legacy. He was trying to perfect his own. He was constructing a portfolio made of human lives. Each murder a brushstroke, each killer a tool, each crime scene a canvas. And worst of all, he'd been active for at least 10 years, completely undetected, using others to do his violence for him while keeping his hands clean enough to slip through any jurisdiction in the world. Mara stared at the crime board until the photos blurred. This man is patient. He's deliberate. He's calculating. And he's not going to stop. Captain Hargrove finally spoke. We need to prepare a public alert. Let the international units know. If he's grooming unstable people online, he could be active in multiple countries at once. No, Mara said firmly. We can't announce anything. He'll disappear. He's too careful. And he'll wipe his whole network the moment he feels exposed. Rocha whispered, So what do we do? We wait. We let him keep talking. Because the moment he believes no one is watching, the moment he thinks he's safe, he'll reach out to his next copycat. And that, she added with chilling calm, is when we catch him. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the entire precinct in a cold white glow. It felt like the city itself was warning them, because Mirror Man wasn't just a ghost on the internet anymore. He was evolving, and evolution never stops quietly. The rain had calmed by the time Detective Mara Larson left the precinct that night, but the storm inside her mind had only grown. The sidewalks glistened with thin puddles that mirrored the glow of streetlights. Small pockets of reflection everywhere she stepped. Normally, she wouldn't have noticed them. Tonight, she couldn't look away from them. Mirror Man. A ghost who never killed with his own hands, yet orchestrated death with the precision of a composer. She pulled her coat tighter and walked faster. Back at her apartment, Mara moved through the darkness without turning on the lights. The quiet felt oppressive, like the air had thickened with each breath she took. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket, Rocha checking in. She ignored it for now. Her thoughts were loud enough without another voice. She poured a glass of water and sat by the window. Below, the city hummed with late-night traffic, but to her, the sound seemed distant, muffled. A faint reflection of her own silhouette appeared in the glass pane. She looked at it for a long time, wondering how many killers, real killers, had stared into their own reflections before doing the unthinkable. Wondering how many of them had seen something missing, and how many had been guided by someone who understood that emptiness too well. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she checked it. A message from Rocha. You awake? New development. Might be big. She grabbed her coat without finishing the water. By the time Mara reached the precinct again, the building pulsed with tension. Officers talked in low, urgent voices. Analysts carried folders as if they were time bombs. It felt like the hours before a raid. Rocha met her at the entrance, face pale with adrenaline. He said, "We got a ping. Cyber traced a redirect signal. Mirror Man logged into one of his old proxy layers, just for 2 seconds, but long enough for the system to catch the tail end of an IP echo." Mara frowned. Location? Rocha hesitated. Not a location, more like a stack, a chain. He's bouncing across continents. But the origin, before the spoofing starts, comes from a specific bandwidth pool, meaning Marajig Mugget has. Rocha whispered, "It's local." A cold ache settled in Mara's chest. You're telling me he's here? In our city? Maybe for years.
She felt her throat tighten. Show me. In the operations room, screens glowed with cascading data. Cyber specialists pointed to a narrow band of numbers, a signature buried beneath layers of misdirection. One analyst turned to Mara. We filtered the origin against domestic providers. The bandwidth match is from a cluster of private networks used in local universities, research labs, and smaller institutions. Mara's eyes darted to the list. Which institutions? She asked. The analyst zoomed in. A list of 6 names appeared. One of them made Mara's stomach drop. Holland Institute of Behavioral Sciences, a small but reputable psychology research center, a place devoted to studying criminal cognition, pattern formation, and obsessive behavior. Rocha looked at Mara. You know it? She nodded slowly. Yeah, they did consultancy profiles for the original case years ago. A few of their staff even came to observe some of the evidence. Her voice hollowed out as she continued. I remember one researcher specifically. Quiet, observant, almost too observant. He asked about ritual repetition, about how killers pick their symbolic acts. He asked more questions than he answered. Rocha stiffened. Name? Mara closed her eyes for a second, digging through memory. He called himself Dr. Vale. Early 40s, soft-spoken, no accent. He seemed normal. But something about him always felt like he was studying us, not the case. Rocha nodded to Cyber. Run it. The team pulled up staff records. Dr. Vale appeared on screen, thin, with narrow eyes, hair neatly combed. The kind of face people forget 5 minutes after meeting him. Clinical, almost unremarkable. He had left the institute 3 years ago. Reason? Pursuing independent research. Address on file, outdated. Last known phone, inactive. Bank account activity, sparse. A life perfectly designed to leave no trace. Mara whispered, He's a behavioral scientist. Of course he knows how to stay invisible. Rocha clenched his jaw. He groomed unstable minds because he understands instability better than they ever could. Mara stared at Dr. Vale's photo. He didn't just study monsters. He cultivated them. The task force mobilized. Officers canvassed Dr. Vale's old address. Surveillance teams combed the institute. Digital forensics tore through his email archives. But every lead orbited around a single truth. Dr. Vale was gone. But Mirror Man was very much present. At 2:47 a.m., another alert triggered, this one a direct hit. A new user had just posted on an obscure dark corner of the internet. A single message. 4 words. A new reflection begins. No link, no context, no instruction, but Mara felt the blood drain from her face. Because the phrasing matched his cycle, and historically, that sentence always appeared 48 to 72 hours before the next killing. Rocha read the message aloud. It's him. No, Mara whispered. It's worse. This means he's already chosen someone. The cyber analyst spoke up. We checked the linguistic signature. It's him. Same stylometry as previous posts. Mara leaned over the desk. Is there anything else? Hidden metadata? Embedded codes? The analyst zoomed in. Yes, in the message header. Not text. Timing. Timing? He sent it from within our city limits. A chilling silence swept the room. Mara backed away from the screen like it had burned her. We need to assume his next copycat is local too. Rocha nodded, and that means we only have a few hours. What followed was an information war against a ghost. Pattern analysts mapped past victims. Behavioral experts searched for potential personalities at risk of manipulation. Street units checked motels, bus stations, abandoned properties, any isolated space that fit the original killer blueprint. But Mirror Man was always one step ahead. He knew investigation cycles. He knew police response times. He knew how long it took for panic to leak into protocol. And as dawn smeared pale light across the horizon, Mara realized something that chilled her deeper than any analysis they had done yet. Mirror Man wasn't trying to stay hidden. He was performing. This was the finale he'd been building toward. At 6:13 a.m., dispatch called in a report. A gas station attendant claimed a man had come in acting strangely, talking to himself about completing the reflection. He bought cleaning supplies and rope, then left in a hurry. The station was only 7 miles from Mara's apartment. The description didn't match Dr. Vale, but it did match the pattern of every manipulated copycat before. A young man, early 20s, thin, hollow-eyed. Someone cracked open emotionally, waiting to be filled. Mara and Rocha sped toward the reported route. Traffic was light. Clouds hung low. The city felt like it was holding its breath. Then, as they passed an old motel, one long abandoned, half collapsed, they saw it. A car, part crooked. Driver door open. No one inside. Mara's heart hammered. The motel structure cast a long, crooked shadow over the ground, and at the edge of that shadow, a faint glint of reflected light. Rocha whispered, "Don't tell me." Mara approached slowly. There, propped against the motel wall, clean despite the dust around it, stood a mirror. Perfectly polished. Her blood ran cold. "She's here," she whispered. Or he was. Rocha scanned the area. "Where's the copycat?" They moved inside the motel. The air smelled of damp wood and old rot. The hallway creaked under their steps. Then they saw him. A young man sitting on the floor, back against the wall, staring at his own shaking hands. Rope beside him. Cleaning supplies spilled from a bag. He looked up when they approached, eyes wide with terror rather than malice. I didn't do anything," he whispered. "I didn't, I swear. I heard him. In my head. Not a voice. More like a feeling." Mara knelt beside him. "Who?" He swallowed hard. "The man in the mirror." Rocha and Mara exchanged a look. She spoke softly. "Did he tell you to hurt someone?" "No," the young man said, trembling. "He didn't say anything. He just made me feel like I had to, like I wasn't complete unless I did." Mara's voice was barely a whisper. "Where is he now?" The young man shook his head. "I don't know. He walked by. I didn't see his face. He wore a hood. He just watched me from the doorway." His breath caught. Then he smiled. They searched the entire building. Every room, every hallway, every shadow. But Mirror Man was gone. Vanished like fog under rising sun. He had come not to kill, but to prove something. To show them he could stand close enough to breathe their air and still walk away untouched. Back at the precinct,
After the young man was taken for psychiatric evaluation, Mara stood in front of the crime board one last time. Dr. Vale's face stared back at her. Rocha joined her quietly. "We didn't catch him." "No," she whispered, "but we pulled someone out of his cycle. That breaks the pattern." Rocha sighed. "You think he'll disappear now?" Mara stared at the board. "No," she said, "he won't." She touched the photo of the mirror left at the motel. "But he'll adapt. He always adapts." Rocha asked, "So what do we do now?" Mara turned, her expression sharpened by resolve. "We learn his reflection better than he learns ours. We study him. We anticipate him. We wait." She paused. "And when he chooses his next copycat," her voice lowered to a vow, "we'll be watching the mirror too." The rain began again outside, soft at first, then steady, then heavy, like the city was washing itself clean while knowing it never really could. Because Mirror Man was still out there, somewhere, walking among reflections, waiting for another mind to fracture just enough to let him in. And the pattern, his pattern, wasn't finished. Not yet.